Smuts, Bosman, Hofmeyr, and the Haunting of the Soul of the White African, written by Angus Douglas with help from Tim Sandham and presented by me, Angus Douglas. In the year 2000, my passion for theatre was reignited when Santa van Baart invited me to perform at the Herman Charles Bosman Literary Festival in Groot Marico on the third weekend of October. And it happens every year on the third weekend of October, and I encourage you to attend that festival in Groot Marico. Now, Bosman is like a Mark Twain of South Africa. His writings and his bushveld characters were rich inspiration for me and my theatre partner, Tim Sandham. We wrote and performed numerous plays and presentations that paid tribute to his work. Before performing our Bosman plays in Groot Marico, we'd take them down to the National Arts Festival in what was then called Grahamstown, and it's now called Makanda. And on the last day of the festival, in the middle of the bleak Eastern Cape winter, we'd be overcome by an exquisite melancholy, the sort that Bosman would have approved of. Old, torn posters littered the town, the crumpled dreams of artists who'd arrived 10 days earlier, full of hope, and now must return to the real world where people don't pay to sit quietly and listen to your neurotic rantings. On that last day of the festival, we'd mournfully pack away our battered props and boxes of unused flyers, damning evidence of our dodgy commitment to marketing. And on the journey back to Gomorrah, which, by the way, is the Khoisan word for Johannesburg, we'd pass towns and signposts with names like Komadacha, Garib, Betuli, De Aar, Tarkestad. And we'd pass small pixie people with caramel skin, another race from another time. They call them Karretjiesmense. Our forefathers brought with them the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I'm talking about our colonial forefathers into South Africa. And lo and behold, they found the Garden of Eden, an untamed wilderness of devastating beauty. But alas, they hunted Adam and Eve and Adam and Eve's children. They chased them down and shot them. The lucky few escaped into the Kalahari, the Kalahari. When I was young, some clever, nerdy older kid who knew it all told me that the Adam and Eve story actually symbolizes man's loss of innocence. Loss of innocence? I mean, this was all too conceptual for my childish brain, so it was explained to me more simply. Now, if Eve didn't eat that darned apple, well, people would still be walking around naked. Well, I must have been going through the beginnings of puberty or something, because all I could think was, darn it, I really missed out, didn't I? In Born to Run, this book by the journalist Christopher McDougall heads to another type of Eden, the Copper Canyons in Mexico, to find a remote and endangered tribe called the Tarahumara Indians. Now, they sustain a punishing regime of distance running, virtually barefoot and without injuries. Now, the book spent 178 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a great book. I urge you to rush out and read it. And it greatly boosted the barefoot running movement. The so-called barefoot running movement is in fact a multi-billion-dollar industry to which I've contributed a few $100s buying Vibram barefoot shoes. Well, it turns out that with or without shoes, you cannot outrun consumerism. McDougall cites scientific evidence that humans evolved to run long distances. We humans are the champion marathon runners of the animal kingdom. Now, early humans loped across the African savanna, hunting prey not only by stealth, but by sheer persistence. You track and you run your prey till they're so exhausted that they drop down almost dead, and you just walk up and you shoot a poisoned arrow into them and kill them. Now, the Tarahumara hunted this way. The Bushmen still do. And it's probably only a matter of time before Nike sponsors the next persistent hunt for rich professionals who've tried everything else. Now, I love the story of persistent hunting. It explains why I feel so alive when I'm running, especially running in the African wilderness. In our distant past, 9 to 5 work was going for a run with your mates through the bush. And when I'm in the Drakensberg, I put on my $100 barefoot shoes and I become a bushman. I tune into the sounds, the smells, what nature's trying to tell me. If my head is too full of thoughts, nature can't get through to me, which is dangerous. If I'm thinking about my unpaid bond and my tax returns, I could step on a puff adder. So I'm running along and nature gives me a major opportunity. A buck, short curved horns, big brown eyes, white underbelly, a mountain reed buck. All I want to do is feast my eyes. But then I remember, I'm a bushman. This moment is the meaning of my life. This creature has been offered to me by the ancestors. I feel love, awe, gratitude, and perfect aliveness all at once. Now, Jan Smuts, South Africa's great statesman and the founder of the Union of South Africa in 1910, he said of the Bushmen, as they were racially and physically not very different 15,000 years ago, what has caused the immense difference between the European and the Bushmen today? We see in one the leading race of the world, while the other has become a mere human fossil verging on extinction. With such politically incorrect musings, perhaps Smuts assumed the purpose of humanity is a mindless sprint toward progress, not a mindful lope through the African bush. Herman Charles Bosman thought differently, and he said, because they were Bushmen, they were concerned only with the deeper realities of life. When they passed by, what they left behind them on kranzes and in caves was beauty. Now, at school, we had a coveted prize known as the Rex Pennington Award for all-round achievement. Now, here's my summary of Smuts' career if he were to enter the Rex Pennington Award for all-round achievement. It goes something like this. Cambridge University's smartest law student, world's greatest guerrilla war strategist, co-founder of the Union of South Africa, dominating the political scene for much of the first half of the 20th century, leading general on the winning side in both world wars, founder of the Royal Air Force, driving force behind the League of Nations, the United Nations and the Commonwealth, botanist who discovered 5 species of African grasses, originator of his own philosophical system, his TOE, theory of everything, Holism, and close confidant to numerous powerful feminist women of the age, including the Clark sisters, who were Quakers, Olive Schreiner, Emily Hobhouse, and Queen Frederica of Greece. It's 1948. Smuts is 78 years old. The century isn't even halfway through, but the Rex Pennington Committee decides that no one can catch Smuts for their special award, not in 50 years, not in 500 years, and so unprecedentedly, they give him the prize for the entire 20th century of an all-round achievement in his career. And Smuts is proud. He is excessively proud of his award, and he forgets he is mortal. In fact, he's no different from the naked caramel people wandering the Kalahari, of whom he thinks so little. Now, the gods who give the award, they note Smuts' hubris and, well, out of kindness, they send him a warning. In January 1948, Mahatma Gandhi is assassinated. Now, Smuts, Obas Smuts, sheds a quiet tear. He remembers Gandhi as a formidable foe and a philosophical kindred spirit, a spiritual friend of sorts. And he calls to his wife, Icy, "Bring me my sandals." These are the sandals that Gandhi made for Smuts 37 years earlier, while Gandhi was a prisoner of Smuts' government. But Smuts does not heed the portent. So, on 25 May 1948, the gods bring the Obas to his knees, and they take his beloved country down with him. With 20% fewer votes than Smuts, D.F. Milan, an old childhood friend of Smuts, steals his throne. Milan's Verenigde Nationale Partij puts an 8-track cassette in the deck and presses rewind. Smuts is devastated. His united party is swept from power by those extolling apartheid. He loses his own seat in Standerton. But it gets worse for Smuts. Only a few months later, his beloved son, Japie, dies of cerebral meningitis. And then the United Nations, Smuts' very own creation, begins its relentless attack on white rule in South Africa. But Smuts has hope. He has Hofmeyr. Now, Jan Hofmeyr is unlike Smuts. He's short, stocky, he has thick glasses, and he lives with his mother. He loves cricket, cats, and Christianity. His holidays are spent camping with the boys of the Student Christian Association on the Natal South Coast, as always, accompanied by his mother, Deborah. Now, underneath the Herculean intellect of Smuts' right-hand man, Jan Hofmeyr, is a little boy who never grows up. If you want to understand Hofmeyr, you can read Alan Paton's 1,000-page biography, or you can spend 15 minutes reading Bosman's interview with him in Trek. Bosman focuses not on Hofmeyr's liberalism, nor his complicated relationship with his mother, nor his complicated relationship with Smuts, but he focuses on Hofmeyr's cats. And Bosman writes, if you are interested, Hofmeyr has 4 cats, a white Persian, a Siamese, and 2 very mixed breed black cats. They travel backwards and forwards between Pretoria and Cape Town with Jan H. and his mother, and their names are poetry. The oldest is Juba, who has travelled more than 20,000 miles in his time and enjoys travelling, and Netsur, twin to Urksur, now deceased, and Ulysses the Siamese, and Nicodemus, so named because he came by night. All this may sound trivial, but I can only say that the New Testament reference, combined with the thought of that unwanted black cat that one night found shelter, left me not unmoved. Now, after the cat chit-chat, Hofmeyr expands on his philosophy, and he says, success in life means only one thing to me, and that is the degree to which you have been of service to others. A statement which prompts Bosman to cough politely into his hand. Bosman ends the piece. He says, I hope that Jan Hofmeyr gets in at Johannesburg North, because the man who is standing against him, Fritz Steyn, is a big game hunter, and I hate all people who destroy animals, Nimrod and Selous and the rest of them, shooting at creatures that can't shoot back. Give me a man that says, enter and welcome to a homeless black cat scratching on his back door in the night. In 1946, ANC leader Alfred B. Xuma met Smuts by accident at a press conference in New York. Now, Xuma had been trying to get an audience with Smuts, but the Prime Minister wasn't interested. And Xuma said, I've had to fly 10,000 miles to meet my Prime Minister. He talks about us, but won't talk to us. Now, back to Hendrik Hofmeyr, who was Deputy Prime Minister to Smuts. And continuing Smuts' vision is not Hofmeyr's destiny, because Hofmeyr dies suddenly on 3 December in that fateful year of 1948. He dies of a stroke, and he's only 54. His mother, to whom he is overly attached, forever blame Smuts for driving him overly hard. The United Nations does not let up until white rule ends in 1994. Its chief weapon is to portray the South African government as the world's moral skunk. Now, as a kid, even I knew the United Nations had done its job well. We were so evil that not even Twinkies or McDonald's would touch us. For young South Africans in the 1980s, travelling overseas meant heading straight to the nearest McDonald's, ordering a double cheeseburger, and biting into the promise of freedom. And by the third mouthful, it was our destiny to taste not freedom but bitter disappointment, the broken promise of progress. Eve lost her innocence on an apple, and we lost ours on a cheeseburger. When I was growing up, I'd badger my dad to do something fun with us. Now, Jeremy Taylor, that great troubadour of South African music, he even made a song about it. Ach, please, Daddy. Ach, please, Daddy, won't you take us to the drive-in? Now, that song ends, if you remember, with Footsack. But before Footsack, my dad would say, stick around, son. I'll make you famous. Stick around. I'll make you famous. Happiness was somewhere out there. I was a kid, so I gave out there a specific location. It was, of course, America. America, a Shangri-La of endless joy and excitement. So I'm standing on our veranda on the Indian Ocean below, and try as I might, I can't glimpse what's beyond the ocean, to America, to happiness. The sun is warm and gentle, and if I'd listened carefully to the waves, perhaps I would have heard them whisper, everything's okay. But I wasn't listening to the waves, I was listening to the radio. When it's sun up in Malibu, it's midnight in Monte Carlo. When Rio strips for the day, LA rides the high rolling sky. Get that wonderful Stuyvesant feeling, the pace of the young fun world. Peter Stuyvesant, your international passport to smoking pleasure. I look up, a Boeing 747 soars above, and I'm on it, drifting ever closer to happiness. In grade 2, my school, instead of giving me a teacher, gave me a psychopath, Miss Smitherman. Now, in grade 3, I fortunately changed schools, and I was jubilant that there was no more Miss Smitherman. Alas, she had also changed schools, and she was now my grade 3 teacher. Miss Smitherman insisted we show our workings in maths. 1 mark for the answer, 5 for the workings. And if you didn't show your workings, she assumed you'd cheated and she tortured you. Now, science is not about the answer. We already know the answer to life, the universe, everything. It's, as Douglas Adams points out, it's 42, isn't it? But what we don't know is how God gets there. God doesn't have to show his workings. Not even Miss Smitherman can force God to show his workings. But Jan Smuts' philosophy is an attempt to discover God's workings. And he liked to quote Blake on this, and as Blake put it, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of the hand and eternity in an hour. I don't know about you, but I feel betrayed by the promise of science. I can't prove it, but while the world is safer, more comfortable, more long-lived, it's become disenchanted. And Smuts, I think, foresaw this. He didn't care so much for stuff. He cared about spirit, as did Bosman. And he foresaw that scientific thinking would colonize our minds, that science cannot answer our deepest questions, that the culture of personality would degenerate into the cult of personality. He saw the universe as a great unfolding magical tale, a tale told by a poet or a scientist, or maybe a poet-scientist like Eugene Marais. And Bosman, in fact, felt Smuts' talents were wasted in politics and that he should have been a poet. Indeed, Smuts, in his early 20s, while making history as the first person to achieve first-class honours in both parts of the law tripos at Cambridge, Smuts penned a biography of the bisexual bohemian force of nature, Walt Whitman. And he subtitled that book, A Study in the Evolution of Personality. And in paying tribute to the flowering personality of Whitman, the man who prefigures the hippie movement, the gay rights movement, the New Age movement, Smuts was well ahead of his time. But what Smuts could never have imagined is that he himself would one day become a symbol of the very opposite, not the liberation of personality, but its repression, a stunting of the South African soul. I believe that what happened in that 1948 apartheid election haunts the soul of the white African. Well, it haunts my soul. And the past has a way of creeping into our stories and haunting them, and staying there. So I wanted to end this talk by telling you that Smuts cracked the code and discovered God's workings. I believe that he did. I also wanted to tell you about Bosman and how 70 years ago he implored whites to see themselves as Africans, as not as poor cousins of Europe. And I've got all the workings, pages of quotations. But that's digging into the past. And how far back should we go? The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The Big Bang happened, 10 billion years before that? Now, Smuts talked of wholes, W-H-O-L-E-S, wholes. And for him, integration and unity were the essence of God's source code. To D.F. Malan, God's preferred method was disintegration. But to Smuts, it was integration. And in 1948, white South Africa rejected a man who believed in integration for a man who believed in disintegration. Smuts wrote, "Wholes are the very basis of reality, and all the problems of the universe can, in the last resort, only be resolved by reference to the fundamental concept of holism." Smuts concludes that evolution is not only the evolution of matter, of atoms and molecules and cells, but it is matter evolving into life, and life evolving into conscious life, and conscious life evolving into consciousness, and then consciousness expanding to take on the full story of the universe. We are the punchline of a story that started 15 billion years ago. And this is the poetry of the universe, God's workings, consciousness glimpsing itself in the rearview mirror. I scoured Bosman's writings for comment on the tragedy of 1948, and there's only one reference. He describes the euphoria of Milan supporters after the announcement that the party of apartheid now rules South Africa. But Bosman was not as delighted. For one, hearing the news, he throws his hat to the ground and he jumps on it 3 times. He picks it up, straightens it out, and puts it back on his head. He offers no explanation for this act, only that it seemed the most appropriate course of action. I'm staring at that mountain reedbuck. God, or the universe, or whatever it is I still believe in, has sent me this animal. It's a totem. It means something. I'm dead still. And so is he. We're taking each other in. There's no one around for miles. The Drakensberg hills roll down toward the Indian Ocean in the east, and the mountains climb towards the setting African sun in the west. This moment feels so very alive and so happy.